How are you, brother?
Good. Good. How are you?
Good. Good, good. 1 second.
Sure.
All right. I was going to wear my headgear. People were expecting a brawl.
Nah, man. Holy cow. How are you?
Good, man. I think it's important that we do this. And I think a few things we have to speak about when it comes to this. Number one, I remember hearing about this. I don't know if it was one of the websites posted like an instructor spiked a student on their head. The student was awarded $46 million. And when I read that, I was like, man, like, and they didn't even say student, they said a beginner student. So I was like, man, what kind of instructor spikes their beginner student on their head? Like, what the hell is this, right? So I had this preconceived notion of what happened in my mind. I imagined somebody, like an instructor, getting irritated with the student. Maybe the student gave him like a tough time. I imagined the instructor shooting in, lifting the student, and like pile driving him on his head, right? And then I read your statement, and I didn't think much because I still, in my mind, was thinking that the instructor shot in, lifted the person, and spiked the student on their head. And then I saw the video, and it just didn't look like that whatsoever, right? Like it was a totally different scenario. And we'll get into what you did, the spiked thing too. So when I first saw that, I was like, man, like this is not what I imagined happening at all, right? So I was just like, what is this? And then I watched it again, and in my mind, you're right, I didn't notice the arm was trapped at first because I actually put on a video that day, like, oh, here's an easy way to escape it. And then you put your video on, and I was like, shit, I didn't realize the arm was trapped, right? But I thought that the student may have initiated a Granby roll, right? Because we could Granby from that position. But like just so everybody knows, my biggest issues real quick, I'll go down the line with Rener, were number one, $46 million. And I'll let Rener answer all this. I'm like, Rener, $46 million. Like I messaged him immediately. I DM'd Rener immediately, and I was like, bro, like, I got love for you, but what is this? This is crazy. Number two, I didn't like the term spiked. Number three, I thought it was a total accident. Number four, I thought he initiated a Granby roll. Number five, I didn't know they tried to settle, right? Am I missing anything my issues that I had?
No, those were what you communicated.
I'll hand the mic to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The 46 million, and you can, I'll let you speak for yourself on this one, but what was your assumption of how that number was arrived at?
I thought it was like you being like, yeah, you know what, like he deserves $46 million. And I was like, bro, what the fuck? Yeah. You know, like it was crazy.
I feel like, Tom, the jiu-jitsu community, there are other people who feel that same way. As if I got involved in this. I think
most people do. Most people do think that you had something to do with it,
and
right?
It was a shock. When you told me that, I was shocked because I had not anticipated that people had associated me to that number as if it was my doing, like my choosing. And listen, I can't be upset about what people know and what people don't know, really, because people simply don't understand the legal system. So for many people in jiu-jitsu, this is their first exposure to this type of proceeding or this type of process taking place. So it's not a crazy surprise, I guess, and especially seeing how much anger and frustration there was associated to that settlement or that payout, that people think what you thought, which was Rener went in there and was like, yo, he got hurt like this. He should get $46 million. So I was happy that you gave me the chance to talk about that.
You were shocked. When I said that, you were like, what are you talking about? You're like, I had no idea.
I was blindsided by that. So just so people know, Tom, and I'll kind of reiterate somewhat of what I told you, is that at no point during this process ever did the attorneys ever even ask me, A, if he should get paid out, or B, how much he should get paid out. There was none. And throughout the entire process, Not once did they disclose to me what they were pursuing. Even during the trial, the witnesses are all isolated and kept away from each other. And they don't say, this is the amount we're going for. Now, that's not my area of expertise. That's doctors, life compensation experts, all the other experts they brought in make a decision. And then the jury ultimately decides what that number is. So when the number came out, I was as shocked as all of jiu-jitsu that it was that high. And like you said the other day, you were like, man, Rener, I think you should have got paid, but that's kind of a ridiculous number. That was what you said. And I'm like, I didn't really have a vote in the matter. I had no knowledge of it. All I knew, Tom, was that they tried to settle with the insurance. Because I said, guys, what about the insurance for the school in the very beginning? And they said, Rener, we went to the insurance, which had $1 million policy limit. And the insurance policy said, take a hike. Basically,
well, that's something we needed to talk about too, because here's the thing, no matter what's, I think everybody agrees that this kid deserved something, because he was paralyzed for how long was it?
Exactly how long, I don't know. I know immediately he lost all function, but he's now quadriplegic and will be that for the rest of his life, essentially.
And I think what happened too, like his Instagram wasn't private, right? And it showed him hiking up mountains. So when you just see, oh, wait a second, this kid, we're told he's paralyzed, but now he's hiking up mountains. Now, I don't know what kind of equipment he's using to help himself hike up or whatever. And God bless him, we all want him to be well, right? But at the same time, I think a lot of people thought, like, wait a second, like, something's wrong here, But since he was paralyzed for an extended period of time, couldn't work, like, this is why we do pay martial arts insurance, right? This is why we do have insurance. So the martial arts insurance, that's like getting in an accident, in a car accident, and then you're Geico saying, hey man, listen, it wasn't your fault, it was their fault, so it is what it is, we're not going to cover you, right? So that wasn't fair, like it shouldn't even have went to trial. It should have just been settled at $1 million.
Listen, and that's kind of what, in retrospect, if we look at it now, the poor decision making by that insurance company, Tom, is probably one of the biggest lessons I learned. Because remember, I was only involved as a participant, as an expert witness, jiu-jitsu guy, but I'm just watching this whole thing play out, and I'm like, man, what are the implications just for me? And what I now understand is that when the insurance company decided they weren't going to settle within the policy limit and say, sorry, we're not going to do this, it gave Mr. Rener no choice but to pursue compensation through the legal system. It opened up everything, and the level of exposure that the insurance company put on the school owners in that decision is astronomical. Now, from what I understand, that $46 million is not coming from the school owner and Iteralde. It's coming from the insurance company, and they're going to go seek that money from the insurance company who made the mistake of not settling when they had the chance. That's my understanding of it. But nonetheless, they should have solved this right up the front. And like you said, if we don't have insurance for issues like these, then the question is, what is insurance for? What are we doing?
And it was a freak thing, but the thing is, we do know there are injuries in jiu-jitsu. That's just going to happen, right? This was a freak thing. Like I've seen people land on their neck in worse positions than this, right? Especially in wrestling competitions and everything, thinking they were going to, I mean, geez, remember Fedor versus Randleman, right? Again, they were pro MMA fighters, is a little different, but I think this was a freak thing. However, if somebody is taken out of work for an extended period of time, our insurance needs to step up a little bit.
You know what it is, Tom? And I think what it is too is the public's misunderstanding between, intent and accidents happening, and then just liability, right? Like there can be an accident that happens as a result of your action, and you still be liable, or you still be deemed responsible in that situation.
Now that's something we got to get into as well, right? The Granby rule. Sure. I was floored when you told me this. Like, I also thought that you were basically saying, like, listen, it's 100% of the instructor's fault. Like, I was expecting the instructor to say, no, he did initiate a Granby roll, and I just went with it. And I expected you to be arguing that, no, he didn't initiate a Granby roll. It was your fault, your negligence. But when I came to find out from you that he never, ever, ever he had no defense, right? Like, he didn't say, his defense was jiu-jitsu, right? Like, that was it.
Yes. So here's what's wild is that as far as I know, there was no testimony in the lead up to the trial that a Granby roll was attempted. But what I do know for a fact is at trial, the judge actually decided, and based on the input from both parties, the plaintiff and the defense, this is important because this Granby roll, Tom, it came out of nowhere. After this release, people started saying, yeah, but what if he went for a Granby roll? And it went from what if he went for a Granby roll to he went for a Granby roll, so therefore he caused it. And then people started taking that headline on MMA or BJJ websites and that kind of bullet point, and then writing about it and publishing it as if it were a fact that a Granby roll was attempted. So then I went back to the trial transcript and basically regarding the Granby roll, there is a quote here regarding, right here. So this is at trial regarding the Granby roll. The judge, this is during my trial testimony, a question was asked of me, and then the judge interrupts the answer with this, and I'll tell you here. The question was, the proper way in which to address this type of move is, would you say, an experienced artist would be to tuck one's head, correct? They asked me that. The judge interjected at this point, it says the court, and it says, Mr. Greener did not do anything wrong. His negligence is not something for you to consider. So ask another question, please. He told that to the attorney. So it was established, Tom, during the trial that Mr. Greener had no involvement.
This is where the instructor needs a better lawyer, right? Like, or the insurance company needs a better lawyer. And also, are we able to talk about when Clark was asked if he would teach the same technique?
Yeah, so the answer is we can talk about it. And from as far as I know, and for the public listening who doesn't know, the expert witness on the defense's side for Mr. Iturralde, the expert witness in jiu-jitsu was Clark Gracie, my second cousin. Very talented, very successful school owner, has his own affiliation, and has done great things in jiu-jitsu as a competitor and as a teacher. So they retained him as their expert. And, you know, again, his deposition, he has it, and, you know, people can find that as well. But generally what was said was that when asked if he teaches the technique this way with the arm trapped, Clark said that that's not how he teaches it. And they said, well, do you teach it over the shoulder in a conventional seatbelt capacity? And Clark said, yes. And they said, why? He says, well, it's safer and it gives more direction to the technique.
Yeah, but right there, that's a showstopper right there, man. You know, like if that's your own defense, you know, like, and I hear what Clark is saying. I get it. You know what the issue is, though, Rener, like beyond all this is like, I don't know if you said it or somebody else said it. Somebody said you should never initiate a technique that you cannot stop at any time immediately, right? So then my question is, what kind of flying techniques could we ever do, right? What about any takedowns once we lift somebody, any mat returns? Now, I don't allow mat returns on my, just so you know, like if somebody stands up and their back is turned and somebody wraps their hands around their waist, I do not allow the person to jump on their back or either to lift them and bring them back down, because I've seen injuries occur that way. But the whole thing is, we say that Iturralde didn't execute the technique perfectly, and my argument to that is, when is anything in jiu-jitsu executed perfectly, right? This is why we train. Like, the same reason why some people quit in jiu-jitsu is the same reason why some people flourish and love it, because it's just, it can never be perfected, right? But guys, like in my mind, I think I could perfect it. I'm sure in your mind you think you could, but we're never hitting the perfect move. It just so happened when he didn't do it perfectly this time, a huge accident occurred. So that's my question to you. Like, what is your response to that?
Yeah, great question. So they asked me, you know, in deposition, they said, Rener, what about asking a technique? What about, when do you know when to do a technique safely? What's your criteria for determining that? And this was my response. And this is actual, just copy and paste. Yeah. For a technique that I might suspect that the person has not learned or would not be able to receive safely. And remember, the context of this, Tom, real quick, is a black belt instructor with a white belt student. And again, we'll talk about Jack's skill level in a second, but just for context, all of this is being framed in the very specific circumstances of this incident. So what has happened in BJJ, and this is sidebar here, is that people have taken this incident that was very specific and spoken about in very specific terms, and they've taken it and kind of amplified it and said, well, we're screwed in every case now. So I just want to make sure we're clear that this was, for this particular case only, everything was referenced to that, and everyone who was in deposition and in trial understood that. So So for a technique that I have, that has a student has not learned and would not be able to receive safely, I don't proceed with the technique. I ask them to stop. I may be in the moment and then say, hey, tuck your head right here so that you can roll and don't hit your head on the ground. So those interventions happen in the middle of training sessions to verify that they're capable if I'm not certain that they can receive it safely. Many techniques in jiu-jitsu do not require the recipient, and in parentheses to know the move, because the pressure and the control is applied so gradually that there's very little risk or concern that the recipient cannot receive the technique and surrender in a safe amount of time. So the smaller margin of response time for the recipient, the more catastrophic the potential injury. Those two variables, the likelihood of a severe injury and response time, the small response time to be able to surrender prior to an injury being sustained, those are the two variables that are essentially the variables that one would ask to ascertain the general or inherent risk of a technique. And the forward flip back take scores highly in the possibility of catastrophic injury, as we now know, and scores very low in the category of time granted the recipient to safely surrender. And that combination of low response time and massive potential for injury is what makes the technique inherently dangerous and why that technique is unadvisable for an expert to apply on a beginner. So what's important to say is, they also asked me, with regard to this maneuver, it's your opinion that this maneuver should have never been done by Mr. Rener? I said, yes, that is correct, particularly by the instructor who was responsible for the safety of the student. Again, if you have two white belts, and this is the important part, who are grappling and they perform a technique on one another because they learned it on some YouTube video, then there's not much we can do to prevent injury. Nor is it the case, Tom, if there's two professionals that are training intensely, accidents happen. So I think the uniqueness of this case was that you have the expert in the room, the black belt instructor, who's the trusted safety advisor, consultant, expert in the room, and he does a technique on a student that the student testifies has never learned and does it in a way that the student did not know how to receive, and it caused injury. So then they made the determination that that created unreasonable risk for Mr. Rener because of the fact that that disparity in skill, but also the intensity with which it was applied and the actual incorrect application.
Now, I hear what you're saying for sure. And anyone who's just coming into this chat, if you guys haven't been watching from the beginning, I would advise you to just wait to comment and go watch from the beginning, because we've covered some of the things we're speaking about already, like the Granby roll. Also, this is not like a debate, right? Like what happened when Rener and I spoke on the phone, there was a lot of misunderstanding. Like a lot of the things that I thought Rener knew or thought Rener did, he didn't know or he didn't do. And a lot of the things that I thought the defense would have in play for common sense, they just didn't have in play. All right. Like, again, they never said anything about a Granby roll. Now, when we talk about the disparity in skill, the difference in skill level, you know, I saw a match of the, what's his name? His last name?
Rener, yeah.
Rener suplexing a kid in a competition, you know. Now, one thing I do disagree with is I don't believe that this particular situation with Rener was totally foreign, right? Like, he's had a lot of wrestling experience, I heard. I think he was a varsity wrestler. I believe that he trained for a few years with Barry Yoshida. I know he's competed multiple times and didn't look like an average competitor. He looked like a pretty strong competitor. Like I said, strong enough to lift somebody and apply a proper suplex, not just a half-assed suplex. Like, he did it perfectly. I can't think that this technique with the arm trapped was so foreign. And again, although he didn't initiate the Granby roll, generally speaking, a wrestler in this position will know to do a Granby roll. Now, here's the problem. If the defense didn't try to say whatsoever that Rener was experienced, that they didn't try to argue the fact that he had years of experience, and you're literally just approaching this as this guy is just a white belt, that's when the waters get mucky, you know. And is that what happened? Is that what happened? Like, they didn't try to say he had experience at all?
No, we spoke extensively about the fact that he had wrestled. We spoke extensively about the fact that he competed as a white belt. And, you know, and I just want to say here that there's so much misinformation and there's so much misclassification and misquoting of the deposition transcripts, Tom, that I've put them on my Instagram profile. I want to say it before I forget, for download. So the deposition transcripts, if you go to my Instagram, click download, you can read the whole thing for yourself. So the defense makes it very clear that the guy was they made it clear that he was an experienced white belt. And I said, yeah, you know, and my position was, he's an experienced, I know he competes, I know he wrestled. I actually spoke to Rener, And that wasn't unclear to anyone. That wasn't unclear to the jury. It wasn't unclear to us. It wasn't unclear to the judge. It wasn't unclear to either party that he had experience as a grappling practitioner. So when they asked me, and I classified him, I called him a beginner, right, as someone wearing a white belt, there were really three things that I was looking at. Number one, his instructors had not given him a blue belt, right? So when you just think loosely about jiu-jitsu, white belt is the early, the novice, the beginner belt, blue, purple, brown, black. The second thing was he's sparring with the instructor. He's sparring with the two second degree head instructor of the school. And, you know, in a relative sense, he's a beginner compared to the head instructor. And then the third aspect was the novelty of this technique to Mr. Rener, that he had not yet previously learned it. So the analogy that I thought of, and I told this to you the other day, and I was like, man, if you have a very accomplished NCAA wrestler who is great grappler, right? From a grappling, not a novice, not an unexperienced grappler, but you bring him into jiu-jitsu, he trains for 2 or 3 months, does not have a very vast knowledge, and then someone puts him in a heel hook, and this the student rolls in the wrong way and busts his knee up. You can say, man, he wasn't a beginner grappler. And I would agree with you that, yeah, he's not a beginner grappler. But when a technique is new to someone, it's almost like everyone is a white belt at every new technique they learn until they become proficient at that. And that's what I explained. I said, look, for this particular technique, and it was very focused on the technique, Tom, for this particular technique, if you do this on someone who does not have knowledge or awareness of what they're supposed to do with their head, it's a dangerous technique. And that was my position, Tom, even before I knew that the arm trap detail, because like I told you, everyone was surprised about the arm trap detail, even me. So when I first saw the video, when the attorneys initially said, Rener, this is what happened, check this out. And I looked at it, I classified it like most of us as a classic kind of rolling Leo Vieira back take from Turtle. And when I went into my initial deposition, which was several months before the trial, like maybe even a year before the trial, I knew something was wrong about it. I suspected something went terribly wrong because the guy broke his neck, but I couldn't pinpoint because the colored footage of the arm detail had not been shared with me or released yet. I only saw a normal roll. So as I'm looking at that, I'm like, man, something went wrong. This move is dangerous. Obviously, this kid got his neck broken. So if nothing else, we know that it was dangerous in that sense. But it's interesting that when I first saw it, I didn't recognize the arm detail. And only several months later, when they said, Rener, here's the actual color detail, I was like, okay, it makes more sense now that this accident happened because this guy was literally bound at the elbow and then driven forward on his head. So
I hear what you're saying. And my question to this moron on here saying, like, making it seem like you and I are having a debate. Of course, leave it to me to call someone a moron. You're too professional for that. We're not even debating right now, guys. We're talking. We're trying to understand one another. Was the word malicious, like, did you say he was malicious or no?
No, not at all. And I think that
so why am I hearing, like, literally I was hearing everywhere that this was malicious intent, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't said. You're telling me it's not, it wasn't said.
You know what I think it came from, Tom? If I had to guess, because I think that if there's one thing in all of this that either I regret or I made a mistake in, it's in using that word spike in the Instagram post initially. And I want to explain that a little bit. And I want to explain a little bit because, you know, that one, first of all, what I know is that the word spike exists in two universes. In the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, the term spike is a noun that describes an actual technique of grabbing someone upside down and dropping them on their head. So there's a very real connotation to that BJJ audience. Now, in a non-jiu-jitsu audience, the term spike can be very commonly used as a verb. We spiked someone. And that verb doesn't have a BJJ illegal technique association. It's just a descriptive verb. So when I'm talking to attorneys, Tom, for the last 2 years, when I'm talking to attorneys in deposition or to the jury in trial, and I'm using this term spike, we're watching the video together. So the video's on a monitor. They're in
I think you really need to put focus on that, right? That when you use that word, that the jury was able to see the actual video simultaneously as you use the word, right?
Times, Tom. Like we're talking, like we're playing this video 70 times. It's ridiculous. So I'm describing it, and I'm literally just in my best English language saying, you guys, so from here, he has his arms around the body. He locks it in. He's driving forward off both of his feet, essentially spiking the recipient's head in the ground, and all of the weight of both people now is being driven into one person's head, and this is what's causing the neck break. So it's being used as more of a technical verb, And then what I realized, Tom, is so throughout the jury, deposition, trial, all of that, they always had context. And then when I posted it on Instagram,
there was no context at all.
Zero context. And worse, within an audience that has a very specific connotation, like you already described in your head of what that means. And that's when I went, holy cow. Like,
well, that's why I messaged you immediately, and I was like, bro, what are you doing? Yep. You know, like, and for anybody out there, like, I didn't agree with Rener. I didn't agree with you testifying. I just didn't. I understand that this kid should have been compensated, right? But I looked at it as a bigger issue than just saying this kid should have been compensated. My worry was that now every person out there, as soon as they get hurt, they're going to sue not just the instructor, but can they sue the individual as well? And yes, they can. And obviously insurance companies are a bunch of morons that don't want to pay up when they should. That's an issue for everybody. But I think what must be said and must be understood is there's a lot of, you and I run things a lot different in our academy, you know, probably not all that different, but different. You know, we have different personalities, but there's a professionalism behind it, and there's a standard that we follow, right? And the T's must be crossed and the I's must be dotted. I think there's a lot of people who open jiu-jitsu schools, and I'm not talking about this case in particular. I'm not talking about that. I think there's just a lot of people who open jiu-jitsu schools because that's the only thing they could do is, I can't do anything else. I failed in everything else in life, so let me just try to open a martial arts school. It should be easy. Well, let me tell you something. It's harder than anything you've ever done. If you want to grow and be successful and really touch lives and help people, this shouldn't even have been, this shouldn't even have gotten this far, I feel, if certain T's were crossed and I's were dotted. I heard from somewhere, I don't know if it's true or not, I heard that, number one, they didn't have a waiver. Number two, their waiver was a kid's waiver. I don't know if you could talk about that or not, or no.
Yeah, we can, and I think we should, Tom, because what everyone's worried about is their level of exposure, right? And this includes me. I think sometimes throughout this, Tom, people forget that I'm in this industry too, right? Like, I'm in jiu-jitsu too. So I did what I felt was right for Mr. Rener in terms of simply standing up for him and saying, hey, this injury could have been avoided. I did what I thought was right, but knowing that I'm from this industry. So I think sometimes people are losing sight of that. But regarding the waiver, it's a very important piece. I think the waiver and the insurance are the two things that every school can learn from this. But in the waivers case, there was a waiver, right? So Mr. Rener in Del Mar Jiu-Jitsu School had at some point signed a document presented to him by Del Mar Jiu-Jitsu. What I can say is that there were some serious errors in the waiver that Mr. Rener signed that, and these are not errors that where it was like, oh, you know, didn't put a period where they should have put a period, and therefore the attorney was able to obliterate the waiver. It wasn't like that. It was so poorly drafted, right, from what I understand, that, and so poorly drafted, and the errors were so serious that the judge, when reviewing the waiver with counsel from both parties prior to the trial beginning, the judge made the determination that the waiver would not be admissible as evidence. So what that meant, Tom, is it meant that the trial were to be conducted and a decision were to be made by the jury as if there was never a waiver signed. So the answer is something was signed, but it became inadmissible because it was poorly drafted. So when I'm talking to the jiu-jitsu industry, the spirit is like, yo, get your waiver drafted and reviewed by an attorney in the state of your school, because every state's different, and I'm not here giving legal advice, but this is one of the most basic things. And the reason why this matters, Tom, and having a properly drafted waiver is so important is because if the waiver is drafted and correctly drafted, which is not rocket science, it just requires some professional attention. If it's professionally drafted, the burden of proof in terms of where liability rests is typically, and again, this is only for my state and I know what's going on here, is that gross negligence. So if you have a waiver where you assume liability, you understand the risk of the activity, gross negligence is the bar at which liability is determined or set. Now, when in the absence of a waiver, gross negligence, from what I understand, is not the bar. It's actually simple negligence. So basically anything below standard of care, or as they explained it, unreasonable risk. So unreasonable risk presented to the subject in a situation, and that is all that's necessary to prove. And again, Tom, I have no idea about any of this. When I'm brought in to the beginning and I'm speaking about it, all I'm going in there is offer an opinion about what jiu-jitsu is and why this move in that particular situation was unsafe based on an expert teacher against a white belt student, why I deemed that an unsafe technique, because there was 5 or 6 alternate options, particularly when the student had never learned that exact technique. So in terms of the waiver, I think you're right. It's the number one. That plus the insurance, it's just the number one thing we have to be aware of, because there are things we can do to reduce our risk. Now, if the waiver was admitted, the question is, would the outcome have been different? Tom, I have no idea what the outcome would have been, because that trial never took place. The trial was as if no waiver was signed, and the result, the jury decided this. Now, one thing I don't think people know, and I just kind of wanted to bring it into the equation as we talk about the jury, is I see in the chats and some of the forums, it's like, yo, they got Rener Gracie to go talk to a bunch of uneducated juries and to just swindle and sway. Like there's just as if, so it was interesting to me that one of the jurors was a brown belt in BJJ.
Oh, holy shit.
I know. So for me, I'm like, hold on, the world needs to know this. And I'm, of course, very grateful for you getting on to talk about this. But there's certain facts about this case, Tom, that when left out of the equation, everyone is so confused and making up so many lies and spreading so many misquotes and out of context that it's things like this that I think people will benefit from and go, oh, well, now that makes sense. That changes things. So when they went to deliberate, I can only imagine, I wasn't there, but when they went to deliberate, you have one guy who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. I think he had some teaching experience, but also an avid practitioner. And he's in there talking to the rest of the jurors about what's real, what's
and he's
not.
educating them, yeah.
No, he's the guy. And they still came up with the verdict. They came up with that number, 46 million. I had nothing to do with it. I knew nothing of it, but I just thought that was an important fact to disclose.
That it is an important fact to disclose. And the thing is, my whole thing was like, I said to people, like, you know, I know, listen, man, we call a spade a spade. People have their opinions of me. They have their opinions of you. People think you're a smooth talking guy. You're a salesman, and you are. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's a great thing. I admire that about you. I told you I admire that about you. You know, I think people who strive for success will look at things and learn where they can learn from it. And people who live through envy turn those same things into something negative, right? I wanted to talk to you because my points that I had about this, I was holding steadfast to these points as far as, no, Rener, no matter what you tell me, you can't tell me that he deserved $46 million. You then made it clear to me that you had no idea what he was being offered. You know, job, pastor, whoever you are, shut up. Number two, I didn't know that they never had a defense. Like, I thought that they had a defense, right? I thought their defense was like, oh, and it might just be something I read. Like, I thought they at least said, yeah, he initiated a Granby roll, but they didn't say that, so you didn't argue against that. Number three, I didn't know Clark, that was on the defense side, actually said he would have taught the technique differently and wouldn't have taught that technique at all because it was unsafe. That's suicide right there, right? You can't say that. So basically everything that I had an issue with was like, you made clear to me, and if that's the honest truth, like, I mean, I don't know. Oh, and I didn't know that they tried to settle. I didn't know that they wanted to settle. So that's a huge thing. Like, I said from the beginning, this kid deserves something. I will not say he didn't deserve anything. What kind of guy would I be if I said, oh, no, somebody breaks their neck, they don't deserve shit? That's not right. I shouldn't be teaching if I feel
Tom,
that way.
if I can interject on that point, it's not even someone broke their neck, they deserve something. It was very clear in this case that a student wasn't just doing jiu-jitsu and broke their neck. A student was sparring with their black belt instructor. It was a huge consideration in this. And I think when you have BJJ, a lot of people right now, Tom, that are pretty scared about any accident that happens on their watch. And I want to get into next here some of the industry standard, industry custom talk that a lot of people seem to have a problem with. But the point is, it's not just someone broke their neck. If two guys were training, two blue belts are sparring, purple belt and a blue belt, they're rolling, and someone broke their neck at your school and this happened, you know, a good heart might say, hey, they should get some form of compensation because you care, but not because right? There was negligence, or where there was liability, or there was responsibility. Jiu-jitsu is dangerous. Things happen. Accidents happen all the time, and people do get hurt. And this was very clear to the jury, to both sides, that accidents do happen. It's so specific, Tom, to this particular situation of you having the instructor, the head instructor, doing it on a student who still wears a white belt. Whose choice that was, I have no idea.
You know, but I think that's the defense's problem, though, because I don't think it is that specific. For instance, in 2009, my first black belt no-gi worlds, I took third. Josh Barnett beat me by 2 points, right? You know what Josh Barnett was going into that black belt worlds? He was a white belt. Do you want to know why the IBJJF made the standards for the belt? Because a guy named Josh Barnett. Because he went in as a white belt, and at 285 pounds, he won the no-gi world championship at black belt. Yet he was a white belt. I don't believe this kid, and I think this is the defense's fault. Like, I think they should have really put a lot more time into saying, listen, there is not, like, the belt standards are not the same across the board. You know, there's some people who are white belts for 6 years. You know, I don't believe people should be white belts over a year if they're training, you know, like, and there's different outlooks on it, but I don't think it was just cut and dry to where it's like, okay, a black belt versus a white belt. But at the same time, I don't think the defense made that clear either. That's the problem. Yeah. Because if it was just the normal white belt with the black belt, yeah, that's pretty stupid. But that wasn't the case here. That's why I think, like, when I heard malicious intent or spiked or anything like that, that's why I was like, wait a second, man, this kid here he is suplexing people. You know, he's not just the regular white belt. He's very experienced, you know. I hear what you're saying, and if that's how they presented it, well, that's what it was.
Yeah, and just to be clear, they you know, it was known to everyone that he was an experienced grappler. And I think what ultimately was concluded, Tom, is that, you know, and again, this was never explicitly stated or said, but it's almost like, yeah, maybe he's a 3-year white belt and he had wrestling experience. I think what ultimately, because this was all presented, remember, everything that I said about, yeah, he's a beginner who had never seen this move, right? And he wears a white belt because someone didn't promote him. Everything that I said, you had experts on the other side that were saying, in many cases, the opposite, saying, hey, he's a dirty white belt, you know, dark white belt who's just has a lot of experience, and this is normal jiu-jitsu and accidents happen. So these things were said, Tom, and that's the whole point, is experts will come in, they'll say what they want, say their opinions, right? Not even facts. They don't ask for facts. They just ask for your opinion. Everything an expert says is their opinion. And then they take those opinions and the jury then deliberates, and then they decide based on everything that they heard. So they were very well aware that he wasn't a first day student. There was no misleading in that sense, but they must have concluded, and this is speculation, they must have concluded that even as a 3-year white belt, if his neck was broken at the hands of the instructor in a technique that was concluded at the end to be done incorrectly, and it could have been avoided.
Concluded also to be done incorrectly, excuse me, because their own person who is supposed to be defending them said it was done incorrectly. Correct?
I have no influence on that side of it. Correct. Exactly.
But that's what was said.
Yeah. What was asked of Clark is, hey, is this how you teach the technique? And he said, no, I don't teach it like this. Now, so here's what I want to get. I want to mention this part because I can see it in the comments of some people, and it's an important part because it's probably the biggest misclassification, Tom, of something I said, and then people taking it and turning it into something imaginary and completely falsified. And then because of this misclassification, you get other people who are just reading headlines or dabbling through an article who didn't actually read the transcript, and then they're following lead, and everyone's just spewing the same misinformation. So I want to get into a little bit, if you're cool with it, about the industry custom time that I use this term, and I'll read the actual quote, and then I'll let you know what the defense testified to in this same regard, right? So I said, regarding beginner classes, I said, customarily, and again, all of you guys can read this in the deposition, which is in my link in bio. Customarily, schools will have beginner classes where white belts largely, and even some blue belts, but largely white belts, are being taught different techniques so they can perform the art safely. And then once they graduate at a certain level, they then move on to more advanced classes. I didn't say what the graduation level was. I know you wait until 2-stripe white belt for them to begin sparring. We wait until about 100 classes. After about 100 classes, they go to the master cycle and they start rolling there. But what people are saying is that Rener's trying to impose a new standard in jiu-jitsu that doesn't exist. How dare him? And I want to read some of the opposition or the defendant's testimony in this regard. And so you understand, Del Mar's jiu-jitsu at the time of the incident, this is what is what they testified to
Yeah,
regarding
can you give me
their
1
levels in
second?
classes.
I'm really sorry. Just 1 second. Continue with that. A few of you asked, what was the problem with Clark Gracie testifying the truth? There's no problem. Testify the truth. But Clark was supposed to be defending the instructor, saying that it was not negligent, saying that it was done correctly, and then he went and said that it was done negligent. Do you understand? That's where the problem arises.
Just because language matters here, Tom. Thanks for clarifying that. I just want to say I don't think Clark said the word that it was done negligent. Just to be clear, I just know that one piece. When asked if he taught it the way that at trial testimony, when asked if he taught it the way that Iteralde did it, I know that Clark said no, he doesn't do it that way. So just to be clear,
and he didn't do anything wrong. But what people need to understand is him saying that has a huge effect in the case, because this is the person supposed to be the expert speaking on the instructor's behalf that made the mistake. So you understand. This is what, it makes sense.
It's fair what you're saying, Tom. And what you guys, for those out there, if I can simplify it further, Tom is just saying a certain amount of this communication that goes into this process is the responsibility of the defendant and their attorneys and their experts, and what defense they bring. So, you know, it's the attorneys ultimately on both sides, and Tom is just pointing out some of the weaknesses in the defense making their cases. And again, that was not my role, not my participation, not my business, but you know, I think that has some merit.
Again,
so anyways,
to the people asking if he should have lied. No, he shouldn't have lied. What I'm saying is that's a deciding factor in the case. If you have somebody who is a witness for you testifying on your behalf, and then they say, no, what that person did is wrong, of course that's going to have an effect in the case. Nothing more, nothing less. As simple as that. Go ahead.
And listen, I think what this all points to, Tom, is there was a truth. There's a truth that the move isn't conventionally taught that way, and someone was injured. I think that's all it's saying. Is like Clark's testimony, it was just the truth, and the truth ultimately led the jury to reach a verdict that they found appropriate based on the injury and all the circumstances and all the facts that they had access to. So here's what Del Mar Jiu-Jitsu said, Michael Phelps, the owner, in his deposition testimony. Is there a required level of experience for this particular class that Jack was in? The answer was no. So could you have someone who was brand new to jiu-jitsu all the way up to someone who's a black belt? The answer was yes. And do you recall what experience level was the people attending the class that day of the incident? And Phelps said, it ranged. I believe almost every single belt level was there at the accident that day. So from white belt all the way from white to black, yes. Is that typically in common? It is for our academy. Our academy is very small. Do you have any type of beginner classes at Del Mar? We don't. Okay. So, and what's crazy is that when Clark testified, their expert, when Clark testified, I don't know if it was at trial or at deposition, they said, and there are 3 skill levels for adults. They're asking Clark at his school, Clark's own school. And Clark said, the 3 skill levels we refer to as roots. That's our fundamentals class, roots. And we have a second level, which we refer to as strategies and class, which is more intermediate level. We start chaining techniques together in sequences. And then we have our more advanced time when we focus on more resistance training, sparring, and specific positional training. So, and then it goes further where people tried to say, Tom, I saw a video yesterday someone sent me, that someone's trying to say that what Rener's saying in this is that white belts should only spar with white belts and that they should not spar with other ranks. And Rener's a lunatic for saying this. This is crazy. And no, it was so crazy that they said this, Tom, that I went through my whole deposition. And I'm like, where are they getting this from? And then I see that they take one sentence from the very top and one sentence from 74 lines later, and then they make their own reality and they spew it out as if it's a quote, but it's not even a quote. So that I took the quote here, Tom, that opposes that. So when they asked me about the safety of jiu-jitsu, and this pertains to Rener's attempt to make jiu-jitsu a new standard. I'm going to speak directly to anyone who thinks I'm trying to change Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You're wrong, and here's why. From deposition, Rener, when asked about safety in BJJ, I said, there are certain guidelines that exist within our organization, but they would not necessarily be the same guidelines that are adopted industry-wide for all of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it is generally accepted that each institution has its own safety guidelines, and those may not reflect what I'm doing in my academy. When they asked me about arm bars being used at every level, safe techniques, I said, yes, I think arm bars are safe and acceptable for all belt levels. Again, whether beginners are using them in sparring, that is between one school and the next, because different schools have different policies, but arm bars are used at every level. When asked about each school being its own entity, they said, now, Rener, is this move, the rolling Leo Vieira back take, specifically this move, which I think is a dangerous move. That's my personal opinion. They said, now, is this move taught to white belts at other dojos, correct? Answer, each dojo determines their own techniques to teach their beginners, correct? Question, right. And in terms of Del Mar Jiu-Jitsu, it has the option to teach this particular move either in techniques or in sparring to its students, correct? Answer, every school can teach whatever it chooses. There's no governing body. There's no oversight. There's no restriction. Every single Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school operates independent of any other unless they're within an organization like ours where we largely dictate what is taught in beginner classes. And then people saying that white belts should only spar with that white belts only spar with white belts. Then they ask me, Rener, are you critical of Del Mar Jiu-Jitsu? This is trial transcript. Are you critical of Del Mar Jiu-Jitsu for having different belts in a single sparring class or session? My response, it's common for jiu-jitsu schools to have multiple belt levels in a single class. So, Tom, the reason why I wanted to point some of these out is...
Yeah, I heard a lot of people say that too. I didn't read in the deposition that it seemed like you were trying to do that, but a lot of people were saying that you were trying to do that.
Tom, and this is the part that's most frustrating to me, is here I get into this case, and the first question I asked myself, when they came to me and said, Rener, would you do this? I was like, man, I don't know. I didn't see the video yet, right? I'm like, I don't know, because I'm in this industry. I'm from this. This is my home too. So I had concerns about, right, taking a position that might, right, have some adverse effect. Of course I thought about that. But then I looked at the video, and I had an incident in 2007 where the same move was done on me, and I heard my spine go like this. All the crunchy sound in my neck. I lived, I survived. It didn't, no hospitalization, but it was a very bad experience for me, this particular technique. So when I saw the video, I thought to myself, man, I looked at it. The kid has broken neck. His life will never be the same. I said, no, I think this could have been avoided. In teacher, student, white belt, I think this could have been avoided was my thought. So I'm going to go render my opinion as to why I felt this was unsafe and why I think it could have been avoided. That was it. I entered into this without spirit. And now here I am at the end of all this, and people are out there taking what I'm saying, and clearly, as you read the deposition, you realize the level of cherry picking and misquoting and really just lies about what this is all meaning. There is no change in industry standard. I didn't try to make my standard anyone's standard. When asked, I told them, this is my standard, as I just read to you guys, perfect verbatim from the deposition transcript. It's my standard, but every school does their own thing. There is no oversight government body that decides who teaches what. And in that sense, I'm rendering my opinions about a move being unsafe. But again, yes, Del Mar can teach whatever they want. And then here's what's crazy. After the incident happened, Del Mar Jiu-Jitsu instituted 3 levels of programs. Beginner, intermediate, the names I don't have exactly, but boom, boom, and boom. And in this early one, on their website at least, it's no sparring. And then the second one, sparring, and then the third one. So, and then here's what's crazy. People said, oh, Del Mar did that because Rener came and ruined it for everyone. But what they don't understand is the case was 5 years ago, Tom. I got involved 2 years ago. Del Mar changed their curriculum 3 years before that when the injury happened.
Well,
and that's why I'm like, yo, why are you guys talking to me as if I'm creating a new standard when Del Mar just did the right thing for their school that they thought was right in the wake of a tragic incident that affected everyone negatively?
Well, here's the thing too. Also, as far as people cherry picking, man, like that's of course like the bigger you get. I mean, there was one time with me, just off topic, someone like attacked my daughter online, said like some terrible stuff. So I went at them super hard. After I did, they deleted their comment, screenshotted mine, and posted it all over the internet like I said this for no reason whatsoever. So I think a lot of times people just tend to, and guys, he's letting me speak and I'm letting him speak. Don't worry. I think they're taking a word from here, a word from there, a word from there, and they're making what they want. What I do think, I think this could have been avoided, honestly, if perhaps your post was worded differently, right? Because we weren't at no one was at the case. Like, no one saw exactly what you saw. No one saw the exceptionally poor defense without even having a defense. They didn't even have a defense. You know, no one knew that the waiver was not there. No one knew that they tried to settle. Mm-hmm. You know, so maybe if you were like, you know, listen, They tried to settle. The insurance company said no. The guy broke his neck. They basically admitted that the kid did nothing wrong. And they asked me if he should be compensated. And I said, yeah. And it just so happens that they compensated him $46 million, right? That's it. But because that is basically what happened, right? But the way it was read, it came across different. And everybody has their own idea about who we are, right? Like, people think you are how you are. People think I am who I am. So they'll take what we say and they'll make it into their own. And I'm guilty of doing that a little bit with you on this one as well, right? But at least I messaged you and I wanted to talk to you about it to try to understand, because it concerned me greatly. Like, I wanted to know what happened here and how does that never happen again? As far as people, you're not a successful martial arts academy if you don't have different level classes. You have to have different level classes. You know how much shit I get, the fact that I don't let my white belts roll on day one? How unsafe is it to let people come through and roll when they don't know anything? Literally just ensuring that they start creating bad habits. Yeah, and I know I came up that way. You probably came up that way. But listen, times have changed. Right now we have the everyday worker, the 9-to-5 worker, the mom, the dad. They can't afford that injury, you know? So I agree there should be some kind. Why shouldn't there be some kind of standard? Why could anybody just open up a martial arts school? Why? Could anybody just be a police officer? Could anybody just be a doctor? You know, there has to be, I don't know how we would come about having some kind of standard. I think it'll be nearly impossible to do, but I understand what you're saying in that point, you know? What do you think about my point with the post? Do you think that could have been?
And here's the thing, Tom. This is new for all of us, right? This experience was new for all of us. I have never done this before. I've never testified. I've never been involved in any real litigation of this nature, a trial. I've never even served in a jury pool, right? I go to jury duty, I sign in, they never use me. So I've never even been on a jury. So I had, other than what's in the movies, this is all new to me. So then when the thing gets announced, I'm like, holy cow, they announced it. It's over. Like, this has been 2 years in the making. I don't know what this means. So I posted a summary of what I thought happened, and I mistakenly used some language, right, in terms of the term spike that I had used with the jury and I had used in deposition, quickly to realize, holy cow, bad word for this audience, because they're making they have a certain preconceived notion there. So and then what I didn't understand, Tom, is I didn't understand, like, what level of, like when you said, Rener, I thought you chose the 46 million. I have no idea how the public is going to interpret something that I've never been part. It's like, you don't know what jiu-jitsu is until you try your first class. You don't know what a lawsuit is until you're involved in the first one. And you don't know
what you don't know.
I had no idea. So what happened was I did a post. There was obviously people felt misled by that. The initial post, which again, I accept was a mistake, and I apologize for that. I apologize to anyone who felt misled by that. But again, I didn't just make that word up. That was language that I had been using throughout the trial with an audience who was watching the video with me, right? But nonetheless, I make a post, and then I don't know what they're running away with, Tom. I don't know what they're going to fabricate, create, what stories people are going to tell themselves about the entire case, how scared they are, right? Because this happened in jiu-jitsu. It's a kind of a big kind of first time in jiu-jitsu for this to have happened. So I didn't know, Tom, what stories people were going to tell themselves about this until weeks have passed. And little by little, you start to see more and more people, you know, interpreting certain things one way, interpreting another way, and you interpreting some way as well. And I'm like, okay, now I have a general understanding of how the world is going to interpret an occurrence like this. And that is helpful. And then I'm just glad that you're open to kind of circling back after about 2 weeks here of just chaos to say, wait, now that we all understand what happened and we all understand some of the facts, let's kind of patch up any holes of misunderstandings about this so that all school owners particularly can go forward with the greatest amount of knowledge from this, because there's so much to learn from this. There's so much opportunity to grow from this and say, okay, wow, I need to check my waiver. I need to make sure my insurance is dialed in.
Brother, I learned from it immediately. Like, so here's one of my things now, and it's been this way for a while. You can't drop in my school unless I'm there. If I'm there, you could drop in. If I'm not there, you can't.
Well,
some people think that's
standard,
silly.
Right? That's the point.
No.
This is your own policy, and
what I do.
That's a good idea.
And people have a problem with it. I say to myself, wait a second. If somebody gets hurt and they decide to sue my school and I'm not there, are you going to are you going to come to bat for me? Are you going to pay lawyer fees? You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's safer to have it that way. And yeah, I circled back because contrary to what people believe, I think it's very important to be reasonable and to have an open mind. And like I said, I feel nowadays people are either on one extreme or the other. Like, I kind of, I always use the example of COVID. I believed COVID was real. My father died from COVID, yet I didn't believe businesses should stay shut. Now, people seem to think COVID's not real, or if you think businesses should have stayed open, you want grandma to die. No, there could be a middle ground where people could agree, right? Like, we could understand the other person's point of view, and I think that's imperative and important for people to understand. And that's why though for those of you watching this, Henry and I basically had this entire conversation on the phone just with he and I at like midnight Eastern Standard Time the other day. You know, like, this is not, we're not debating for you or putting on a show. We're literally not. We're just talking like we would talk if you weren't here. And what I said is why I think everyone could learn from this, because I think it is important to hear two people that are successful in their own right, that had a strong belief about something, that could kind of take a step back and say, well, you know what? I understand why you did this or why this happened that way. And that's the way I am now. As soon as the only reason like I'm even having this is for the people, because as soon as you told me you didn't know about the 46 million, they never said Granby roll, and they tried to settle and they didn't, to me, my hands were washed. I said, okay, well, what it is what it is. You know, I didn't know that. Then you explained to me, and then I know. That's why I didn't go harder in the beginning. I posted the video, I said what I said, but I never attacked you, you know, like, because I didn't feel a need to. I wanted to know.
You also DM'd me, bro, and you were like, Henner, like, what the hell? Like, this is crazy, because your perception of it was one. It was, like I said, you didn't have all the facts, which is fine. And even the detail about you showing the video, right? When you showed the video of how the technique is done correctly and safely, like I said, when I first saw the video, when I first decided to get involved in the case, I did not know the arm was trapped wrong. So my initial assertion that, you know, that this technique is dangerous was, even with the technique done correctly, it was my opinion and my position that the technique is dangerous if you use it on someone who's never learned it and you use it with full force on a white belt. That was my original position. And then as more information became available about the arm position, it just added greater clarity. So everyone's only going to be as clear as the information they have at that given time. And I totally, like I said, I respect you immensely for taking a position initially that was, again, limited in the details you had access to, but then being willing to say, wait a minute, that was based on those facts then. Now that I have new information, I have a new understanding. And that's kind of what my hope was in having this talk, is that other people could kind of have a similar approach to where they can have a certain understanding based on my initial post, and that's fine, because that's all you had. But now with more information, things should change. And one thing that people are really scared about, Tom, is this precedent. Everyone's concerned about, what does this mean for two blue belts, or for a black belt sparring with a blue belt student, like, or a purple belt student, or two purple belts sparring at your school? What does it mean going forward, right? And they asked me, they said, Henner, at trial, they said, Henner, regarding using the techniques that you haven't taught on someone, sorry, it was basically what I'm seeing online is some people are saying you can never use a technique on someone that you haven't taught them, right? And what the question was, are instructors at your school, Henner, allowed to use move on students? This is just a simple question. Are instructors at your school allowed to use moves on students in sparring that they have not taught to the students, right, technique-wise? And my response was, yes, if they can do it safely. Like, that's just my position. Do move safely on students if you're an instructor. And that's the same advice I tell everyone, just my own personal. This was not in testimony. This is just my fact. Like, you have your own policy. I just say, guys, if you can't do it safely, don't do it. Like, I really am cautious about it. And again, we're a much.
I completely agree. And here's the thing, too, as far as that rolling back take, just so everybody knows. Oh, also, guys, I see Dylan is here. I have no issues with Dylan. Dylan, I hope you're great, bro. I think your father. I think your father passed away, and I'm so very sorry for that. It's my second year today where my father is not with me, so it's a terrible thing. Anyhow, some of you guys are also asking me about other things about Henner. This conversation is what this conversation is about. It's not about to start a beef that isn't there. With the rolling back take, understand, the more you roll to your side, the safer it is, right? The more you roll over the neck, the more dangerous it gets. So it's at its most dangerous when you almost roll to the complete opposite side, which was done there, right? So that does get a little bit more dangerous.
He was fully inverted, and it's like, you know, we saw what happened. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to play it again. We saw what happened. And listen, and that was what I saw. I saw, man, a guy broke his neck for a reason. There's this technique, right? If it was done correctly and the guy broke his neck, let's say he did it technically with the over-under, I'm looking at it and going, man, he broke his neck. Nonetheless, he went straight over the top and broke this guy's neck. So one way or another, the fact is the guy's neck was broken by this technique. So my initial position was very much like, yo, it's, you know, it's dangerous regardless. And then when I saw the arm, it was just worse. Now, another precedent they're saying, or some people are concerned about, and again, I just want to address these, Tom, because I'm tired of people taking the quotes and misquoting it, so I'm going to actually quote myself. And they said regarding, like, you know, having a documented curriculum, right? So at Gracie University, I know what every beginner learns because we have Gracie combatives, we have our cards, right? So I know because it's this curriculum-driven thing. And then they said, Rener, at Gracie University, your system employs ways in which individuals check into each class, and there's a compilation of their attendance, correct? And they said, I said, correct. And they said, but that's not used at every dojo, is it? And I said, it's not. And it falls back into the category of, hey, every school is its own entity. So there was no attempt to project a reality about jiu-jitsu in terms of the bigger picture and how every school should be run. That was not the case. It was very clear to the attorneys and very clear to the jury that I run my own organization the way I run my organization. They were asking for my opinions, which I rendered. And then they came to their own decisions on all of that. And it's crazy, the level of misquoting. So I appreciate it.
What I was confused about is people were telling me that you said that he got tombstoned, right? Didn't you remember I told you that people were saying that? You never said that word before, right?
Tombstone, no.
People are like, oh yeah, he said he spiked him in tombstone. I'm like, isn't the tombstone what the Undertaker does?
No.
Like, that's what
yeah.
Rener said, and you never said that ever. And you saw me write that the one time, right? That's what was somebody was. A bunch of people told me that. That's why it's such bullshit, man. Like, man, you know, I don't know. Again, I didn't come on this thing to debate you or to argue with you. I just wanted to say I knew when we spoke the other day that my part was cleared up. Now, again, whether or not I would have testified or not, that's neither here nor there. It just comes down to my biggest issues that I had. You addressed them, you know, and they were not even issues because they weren't real. Basically, they just weren't real.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So I mean, and I think people need to understand. Just cross your T's and dot your I's, man. You know, run your school professionally. Prepare yourself. You know, it's funny when my fighters ask me, like, "Hey, how should I prepare? What should I do?" I say, "Read a book." Right? Read a book. Learn how to learn, right? That's neither here nor there, but, you know, I learned in this process. I absolutely learned in this process, you know, and for those who asked me about not allowing drop-ins when I'm not there was a few people in here that were irritated with me saying that. It's my school. And those who were irritated with me saying that, God forbid if something happened when I'm not there, I don't want to have to sit in court. I don't want to have to hear what could have happened, you know, or what did happen. Like, I want to make sure I know exactly what's happening in my school when I'm not there. If anyone is there that I don't know. Furthermore, I don't know the student who's dropping in. So if a student's dropping in and I don't feel they're safe, I could say, hey, don't train. All right, I'm going to keep them away from this person or that person. Not everybody cares about your school the same way you care about your school, right? Like, you know, my school manager, Danielle, she does an amazing job, but she's in the office. She can't be out there, like, doing every single thing. You know, it takes a village, you know, and I think we all got to understand that. And even in the jiu-jitsu world, like, we need to understand that, you know, and I think this is really tearing people to different sides, and people are creating, like, trying to make it seem like we were enemies. Like, even in this, like, guys, we're not debating. We're just talking, you know? And as far as open mats, if I'm there, yes, you're a visitor. You could always come through. What kind of man would I be? Like, I give seminars all over the world at different schools from different affiliations. If you're from a different affiliation or a different school, come hang out, train with me if I'm there. If I'm not there, no, wait till I'm there. Why do you want to visit my school when I'm not there anyway? You know what I mean? Like, you want to shake my hand, give me a high five, you know? So, man, I'm glad we're able to have this conversation, you know, and I'm also glad that I didn't take everything I read in the beginning and go full speed with it. And guys, just so you know, I literally did. Somebody was like, oh, why don't you address Rener personally? Guys, the first thing I did was message Rener and DM'd him like, bro, what's going on here? you know. Your patience with this is admirable,
Thank
though.
you,
That's
man.
something that I learned, though, honestly. And those people are gonna be saying, "Oh, Tom is riding Henner's dick." No, I try to learn as much as I could from everybody. If I were Henner in this case and people were misquoting me, I would have lost my mind. I would have went insane, right? We were playing phone tag for a little bit. This is 2 weeks after the case. So you sat here having certain people misquote you for 2 weeks, not saying a word, staying patient, I guess knowing that everything eventually will come out the right way, right? And there's still going to be people that disagree with you and disagree with me, you know? But it is what it is, man. I think it's good.
It's really interesting. And I just can't thank you enough, Tom, for your willingness to, you know, again, you had an opposing view until clarity was granted. You did have an opposing view on many of these issues because the information you had or didn't have access to. And for you to be open to even talk, right, to even respond and answer a DM or say, yes, Henner, here, call me, let's talk about this. I was like, man, like, listen, you know, there's no surprise that you've reached the levels that you've reached, right? Both as a school owner, as just a human being on this earth, and in terms of the success of your school, your affiliation, your relationships. None of it's a surprise. Seeing how you were able to, right, just have an open mind and be able to entertain a discussion here that would grant greater clarity. It's almost like, you know, you didn't care who was right, you cared what was right, and you found it, and you were open. Like in jiu-jitsu, I always say to my students, it doesn't matter if a technique works for you or a technique
100%.
works against you. Jiu-jitsu worked.
Yeah.
So when you appreciate jiu-jitsu in that extent and have that relationship with it, you kind of set yourself free, and I just feel like you're living life that way. And I know a lot of people are scared, and I feel like a lot of people, Tom, with the misconstrued kind of misquoting and misgrabbing and all the out of context communication that happened on this, a lot of people are just they're scared because they hear this big number. Again, I had nothing to do with it, but there is a big number nonetheless. And they're like, what are the implications for me? And all I can say, and what I think we can kind of wrap up here on, is that any precedent that people are scared about, like, oh, this means X, Y, or Z. No. And this is attorneys who said this, right? Publicly. They're saying, look, there's no new precedent. The precedent is treat your students, protect your students, be safe in your gym, and ultimately, you know, there's no precedent that's created from this that didn't previously exist, right? And there's no gross negligence, which again wasn't the determination in this case, but gross negligence will not be protected against with any waiver, right? So you have to be reasonably safe, and you have to avoid putting your students in unreasonably risky situations, and you do the best you can. And this idea of, you know, any student sparring, it's going to be a disaster from everyone. No, my feeling was that any precedent thoughts are limited to the facts of this case, Tom. So unless another situation occurs where all the facts are identical, this case has no bearing on that, is what my understanding is from what the attorneys are out there saying right now. So I think everyone can relax. Everyone can keep doing great jiu-jitsu. But I do think, Tom, that if everyone gets fixated on much of the drama that has been very loud over the last 2 weeks, I think ultimately what happens is we miss the opportunity to grow from this experience. And because we're missing the forest for the trees, as my friend Rob says, we're missing the forest for the trees here, right? Like, we're missing the opportunity to ask ourselves, wait a minute, a guy broke his neck. His whole life will be changed forever. His instructor was involved in this. And to be clear, his instructor, I have nothing against Ederalde. He could be a great guy. I hear he's a great teacher, talented competitor, as we all know. So I have nothing against him personally. This was not a matter of intent or maliciousness at all. It was purely a matter of a guy broke his neck, and the rest of his life is affected as a result of that. And as we look at that, there's two possibilities. One is he breaks his neck at the hands of his instructor and is compensated for medical bills and for life income opportunities affected, all of that, which is what happened. The alternative, Tom, and this is one we must consider. Let's imagine if a guy gets his neck broken, very much the same circumstances, at the hands of his instructor, and it becomes public, it becomes known that that is acceptable conduct.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. That's a problem, right? What what the biggest issue here is, honestly, is the damn insurance company, man. They should have settled when they asked. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. You know, we pay insurance for a reason. You know, brother, I think we answered everybody's questions. I appreciate you. Thank you for clarifying some things that I didn't know. Once you explained to me, we were both in shock the other night. We were like, what? You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy, man, what a simple discussion could do. You know, and those you people, like, hopefully you see, like, I know I got a lot of flack from people. Guys, I'm always willing to have a discussion. The only time I kind of lose it is when people just immediately disrespect me. I would always rather talk and show love first, right? So, Rener, I appreciate you, brother. Any last things you want to say?
Nothing but thank you. And again, for the people out there watching, you know, if you were one of the people that were perpetuating, right, your own quotes and misinformation, you have a choice now, right? You have more information available to you. My deposition transcripts are downloadable at my link in bio. Read the whole thing for yourself, right? And ask yourself if what the kind of the aggregated headlines people are putting out are true or not. Decide for yourself. Don't just regurgitate what someone else is saying. And that's all I can say. And I appreciate everyone who has an open mind to listen at a time where this is a crazy occurrence, a tragic occurrence for jiu-jitsu as a whole. Tragic for the school, tragic for the instructor, tragic for the insurance company, tragic for Mr. Rener and his family, tragic for all of us to look at that and know that that happened on jiu-jitsu's watch. It sucks for all of us. So the question is, how do we take this and get better as a result? And in order to do that, you have to take off the blinders and ask yourself, really, what's the bigger picture here? What can be learned, like Tom and I have done today? And if you can do that, I think jiu-jitsu, Tom, ends up in a better place 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now because of this incident and what people are going to learn from this than where it was 2 weeks ago. That's my belief. It's my hope.
Well, it can. And I said before this, I said, whether you like you and I or not, like there's going to be things that people could learn, right? Any potential school owner, any school owners, if you can't learn from this, you know, you're never going to learn. You know, I mean, that's just what it comes down to. So, yeah, jiu-jitsu could continue to progress in a positive way for some people. But then for other people, they're going to be left in the comment section talking shit, making problems that don't exist. Yeah. You know, who are you going to be? Who are you going to be?
We'll end there, Tom. I appreciate you, bro. Have a great weekend. Congrats on all the success, Tom, and thanks for everything, man. I appreciate it.
You too, bro. Take care.